He raised my son for 6 years, then found out the truth. I've deleted this recording 4 times already. The first version sounded like I was asking for sympathy. The second one sounded like I was trying to justify myself. The third was me crying so hard you couldn't hear the words. This one is just the truth, told slowly, so I can live with what I did by saying it out loud. If you're here to judge me, you won't have to work very hard. If you're here because you made a mistake and want to feel less alone, I can't promise comfort, only honesty. I am the woman who lied. I am the woman who said he's yours, and let a good man believe it for 6 years. I'm going to start at the beginning, because beginnings always sound cleaner than they were. My name is Lena. I was 23 when I met Marcus at a coffee shop I didn't even like. The coffee was bitter and strong, and the barista always forgot my name. But the place had big windows and small tables, and when you're 23 and lonely, windows and tables feel like a kind of company. He asked if he could share my charger first. That's how it started, one phone dying beside another. He had gentle hands, the kind that set things down carefully. He smiled with his mouth closed, like he was saving something. We talked about small things at first. Movies, music, celebrity gossip, and that one bakery on the corner with the cinnamon rolls as big as your face. He said my laugh sounded like a wind chime someone forgot to take inside for a storm. I thought that was the nicest thing anyone had ever said to me. We took the long way home together. He lived 3 blocks past me, but he'd walk me to my building anyway, then walk back in the cold. After the first month, he brought me a spare umbrella to keep. After the second month, he kissed me at my doorway that smelled faintly like rain and laundry soap. After the third month, he learned how I took my coffee, how I folded my socks, how I slept with the blanket tucked under my feet because my grandmother taught me that's how you keep the night from taking your warmth. We weren't glamorous. We worked. We budgeted. We kept our receipts in a bowl by the microwave. He was the steady kind of person who buys the extended warranty and actually reads the instructions. I was the improviser, the we-can-fix-it person, the one who thought everything could be smoothed with a joke and a hug. He held the map. I held his hand. That was the rhythm of us. When we got engaged, it wasn't a flash mob or a drone show. It was a quiet Sunday morning. He burned the pancakes, then set the ring down on the plate between 2 black-edged circles and said, "I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry?" I didn't even let him finish. I said yes with my mouth and my whole body, and every year I hadn't yet lived. We moved into a small apartment with thin walls. Our upstairs neighbor played the violin late at night. It sounded like someone was teaching a bird to talk, and the bird was stubborn. We bought a second-hand couch the color of oatmeal and pretended it was a shade called Windswept Dune. We put a deposit down on a wedding venue we couldn't really afford, and then we did the math, and then we admitted we'd be happier at the courthouse. He squeezed my hand and said, "It's not the wedding I want, it's you." He loved me like I was a long project he was excited to keep working on. He looked forward to fixing the squeaky cabinet together. He looked forward to choosing a paint color and arguing about it, and compromising on a color we both hated at first, and then loved because it was ours. He looked forward to getting a dog. He looked forward to the first winter we could afford to leave the city for a week. He looked forward to a child. He said it the way you say the name of a city you want to see before you die. Quiet, careful, almost like a prayer. We weren't trying, not really, but we weren't not trying either. We were letting life decide, which is what people say when they don't want to admit they're scared. Months slipped by. He'd buy me ginger ale every time I had a headache and watch me hopefully. I'd wake up and take a test I didn't tell him about, just to break my own heart in private. It was around then that work changed. My manager went on leave, and I stepped into more responsibility than I knew how to carry. Late nights, early mornings, an inbox that looked like a sink you never catch up on. We were understaffed and overpromised. There was a new guy on the team, a contractor named Aaron. He had the kind of confidence that looks like kindness at first. He remembered birthdays, brought in muffins, laughed at jokes that weren't funny as if he could turn them into jokes by the force of his smile. I want to say I was immune. I want to say that love is armor that doesn't dent. It should be. It wasn't. The temptation wasn't a single moment. It was a slow tilt. He would compliment me when I was upset from a meeting where every idea I had was swatted down. We would eat meals in a yellow takeout container while we talked about nothing in particular and everything that mattered to me that day that I didn't have time to translate into something Marcus would understand. That sounds like an excuse. It is, and it isn't. One night we were the last two in the office. The building had this automatic lighting system that went dark if you didn't wave your arms every few minutes, like the room needed constant proof you were still there. We were talking about deadlines. He told me I carried the whole team. He said I was the kind of woman people write books about but don't know how to love while she's alive. It was too much and too targeted, made to fit the hole I didn't admit I had. I laughed. There was a storm outside. The glass shook a little in the wind. I said I hate thunder, and he said, "Me too, but don't worry, I'll keep you safe." My body heard something else. When I stood, he stood too, and we were too close, and neither of us moved back. The lights clicked off like a warning. We waved our arms to bring them back on. We didn't take the warning. We didn't take any of them after that. I wish I could tell you I stopped at the first wrong thought. I didn't. I opened the door a crack, and then I wedged a shoe in it, and then I held it wide. We met twice by accident that first week. Then not by accident, when we messaged each other. We told ourselves we were careful. We tried to build a small house where the consequences wouldn't reach us. We were idiots. The world is nothing but consequences disguised as normal days. The night I crossed the line, it wasn't cinematic. There was no music. There was my phone face down on the table so I wouldn't see my lock screen photo of Marcus holding me on a pier. There was a couch in a rented apartment and a lamp that flickered every time the fridge kicked on, and the sweating outline of a water glass on a coaster shaped like a state I'd never been to. There was my chest, tight with something that wasn't quite desire and wasn't quite grief. There was a need to feel like the person I was before trying became not trying, before hope turned into a calendar. There were too many texts I hadn't yet deleted. There was me, stepping over a line I had drawn myself, a line I believed protected me because I believed I'd never cross it. After, I walked home in the rain and pretended that made me cleaner. I showered too long and pretended that made me cleaner. I crawled into bed beside a man who turned toward me in his sleep like a compass, remembering where north is. I tried to pretend that nothing happened and it was all a dream, but it didn't work because I keep remembering what happened between me and Aaron. The affair lasted 6 weeks. That's the number I say when I want to feel like it was small. I try to stop, but somehow I keep going back. I managed to live 2 different lives in those 42 days. I was the fiancé who picked out invitations. I was the employee who smiled across a conference table like I wasn't burning. I was the liar who learned how to put my phone on focus mode and say it was for productivity. I was the girl who stood at a bathroom sink at 3 a.m. and stared at her own eyes, like she could interrogate herself into stopping. And then, one day, I stopped. Not because I was scared. I was exhausted, because the lie was heavy and my heart got tired, because Marcus asked me, casually, if I wanted to go to the farmer's market on Saturday, and I started crying so hard he got out 3 different cookbooks like he could solve me with recipes. I told Aaron it was over. He shrugged like I had canceled a meeting. That was the last time I saw him. In my head, I turned the page. 2 months later, I missed my period. I told myself it had to be Marcus's. The timeline could be squinted at until it looked safe. The baby would look like him. The baby would be him. My guilt would make me careful, and careful would make me good, and good would make me worthy of what I had done to keep this. That was the story I told myself. That's how liars survive. We build ladders out of the words probably and maybe, and then we stand on them and say we're tall. When the test turned pink, Marcus's face cracked open like a sunrise. He sat down hard on the closed toilet lid and laughed like a man who'd been holding his breath for a year. He put both hands on my stomach as if the baby were a radio and he could turn the dial to tune. We danced in our small kitchen to a song the neighbor played on his violin late at night. It was off-key and we didn't care. He assembled a crib and read the manual twice. He researched car seats like he was applying to med school. He asked my mother for the stories of my childhood because he wanted to love the exact person I used to be so he could love the person our child might become. I watched him, and I loved him, and I loved the idea of a world where love could erase arithmetic. I thought, I will tell him someday, after the baby is born and safe, after the first year, after we are strong enough, after it becomes a footnote. I kept moving the after. I moved it until years were made of afters. Our son was born on a raw day in late November when the sky pressed low and gray against the city. He came out with a fist raised like he was telling the world to wait its turn. Marcus cried. I bled. Someone wrapped him in a blanket printed with tiny giraffes and said his APGAR score like it mattered, and then they put him against my skin and I felt a love so huge I didn't deserve it even for a second. We named him Theo because it sounded like a doorway, small, simple, and opening into light. If this were a story about redemption, I'd tell you that becoming a mother cleaned me, that I was reborn too, that I became someone who would never again, not even once, choose a selfish moment over the people I loved. I didn't cheat again. That doesn't make me clean. It just makes me careful in a new way. The lie stayed. It got bigger. It took up a chair at our table. It grew teeth. Every birthday candle I made the same wish. Let them never have to know. Every time Theo smiled with his whole face the way Marcus does, I breathed easier. Every time he furrowed his brow in a way I didn't recognize, I felt sick. I kept a box of half-truths under the bed where the baby clothes used to be. For 6 years we were happy, mostly. Real-life happy with sleep deprivation and money math and nights we barely spoke because we were both poured out by work. There were bedtime stories and tiny sneakers and the first scraped knee that bled more than I thought knees could bleed, and a dog we never did get because the building didn't allow them, and the way Marcus would fall asleep with his hand still on Theo's back like he could keep him from falling even in dreams. Love is dailiness. We had that. Now I'm going to tell you how it ended. I will be exact. It was a Wednesday in March, cold, wet, a wind that made the umbrella worthless. Theo had complained of stomach pain all afternoon. By evening he was pale and glassy and they told us to bring him in. The ER was bright and exhausted and full of rules that all sound like apologies. They checked him fast. Appendicitis, they said. A word that lands like a punch and then turns into a plan. They asked us questions about allergies, history, blood type. Marcus said he was O negative. I said I was a positive. The nurse wrote it down. We signed forms. Theo squeezed my fingers and whispered, "Stay." I told him we would be right there every second. I meant it. I thought I meant it about everything. The surgery went well. He was small and brave. He slept with his mouth open afterward like a small bird. We pulled the hard hospital chairs together and made a bed of them with our coats. At 3 a.m., when we were the only 2 adults awake in the ward, a resident came by with a clipboard and a question. She said, "Just to confirm, Dad is O negative?" Marcus nodded. She said, "And Mom is a positive?" I nodded. She frowned a little. It's unusual for a child with AB to have an O-negative father. Not impossible in edge cases, but unusual. We regularly mix these up in intake, so no worries. We'll verify. She said it like she was talking about a misplaced stapler. She moved on. I felt the ocean tilt. I felt the floor become a question. I had known this could happen, in a different way, a someday way. Marcus looked at me with a face I had never seen. Not anger yet. Bewilderment, like someone had turned off gravity and was asking him to keep standing. He said my name once. He said it like a password that suddenly didn't work. When Theo woke up, I told him the nurse had to check on something. I kissed his forehead and said I'd be right back. In the hallway, under the soft hum of vending machines and the click of faraway shoes and the smell of sanitizer that never leaves your nose, Marcus said, "Tell me there's a reason." I said, "There is." He said, "Tell me the reason." I opened my mouth and my reason came out in pieces like broken glass. I told him about the office lights and the rain and the messages and the 6 weeks and the positive test and the ladder of probably in the years of after. I told him his son was his son because he made him that, every day, but that blood does math without asking permission. He didn't shout. That would have been easier. He sat down on the windowsill and put his face in his hands and made a sound people make when something is being pulled out of them without anesthesia. I touched his shoulder and he flinched like I had burned him. He said finally, "How long?" I said 6 years. He said, "No." "How long have you known?" And I said, "Since before we knew him." He laughed. It was the ugliest sound I've ever heard. The resident came back later with a corrected chart and a kind smile that said, "See?" As if all she'd done was fix a form. The damage was already done. It wasn't her fault, it was mine. We brought Theo home the next day with a small incision and a bigger appetite for popsicles. We tucked him in and read 2 chapters of a book about a boy and his very nervous dragon. When he was asleep, Marcus packed a bag. He moved slowly, like the room was underwater. He put in socks, shirts, the t-shirt he got at the marathon even though he didn't finish. He paused at the door and said, "I don't know how to be in a room with you and not see it anymore." I said, please just," he shook his head. "I have to think, and I can't think here." He didn't slam the door. He closed it with the same careful hands he used on everything he loved. The lock turned, a small sound. I called him 12 times that night, then I texted, then I emailed. Then I wrote a real letter because paper felt heavier. The next morning my number was blocked. My emails bounced back. The letter came home with a yellow sticker that said return to sender. There is nothing dramatic about being shut out. It is just a long quiet. For the first week, I kept expecting him to walk through the door in that sweatshirt he hates but always wears when it rains. For the second week, I stopped leaving the hallway light on. For the third, I learned his new silence in new ways: the missing shoes by the door, the toothbrush cup with room in it, the way the couch had a dent on one side that didn't fill back in. I told Theo Daddy was at Grandma's helping fix her porch. It wasn't true, but he is 6. I bought a toolbox and stared at it like I could will it to become a porch. There are practical things people don't tell you about the aftermath of betrayal because they sound petty next to the big words. Grocery lists are battlefield maps. I couldn't buy the cereal he loved without feeling like I was stealing it from him. I switched brands of detergent. I washed the sheets twice, and then I changed them, and then I bought new ones I couldn't afford because the old ones remembered too much. I went to work and kept my head down and told HR I would not like to speak to Aaron and also that I would like to never hear his name again as long as I live. He had already left for another contract by then. Of course he had. I watched Theo become someone with a question in his eyes. He didn't ask it for a month. Then, on a Tuesday, in the middle of impossible math homework, he said, casual as a coin dropped into a jar, "Is Dad mad at me?" I told him the truest thing I could without turning the house into a courtroom. I said, "No, baby. Dad is hurting and he needs time. It's not because of you." He nodded like that made sense, like time and hurt were things you could chart. He drew a picture on his iPad, 3 stick figures holding hands, one with very tall hair that was probably mine. He added a 4th figure standing far away with a line through it and then erased the line. "That's Dad," he said, and he put a purple heart over the far away one. "He's over there, but he's still ours." The first birthday without Marcus felt like an unlit candle. My mother brought over too much food and sat on the couch like a guard dog. After Theo went to sleep, she took my chin in her hand the way she did when I was 12 and had lied about where I was. "You have to tell him," she said. I said, "Tell who what?" And she said, "You have to tell your son the truth when he's old enough. And you have to tell yourself it now. You didn't just lie to a man. You stole his decision." I know. Lawyers came later, the kind who wear polite suits and talk like they're arranging furniture. Because Marcus is on the birth certificate, he could petition for custody or visitation if he wanted. He didn't. He sent one message through his lawyer, and I read it a dozen times, each time slower. It said, "I love this child. I cannot be his father while this particular truth is alive between us. I will not drag him through a fight about my pain. Enclosed is information about a fund I've set up for him. It will be funded monthly. Please do not contact me directly." I opened the bank website and stared at the number like it was a temperature in a country I'd never visited. It was generous. It was entirely undeserved. It was who he was, steady, careful, formal in his goodness. I sat on the floor in my winter coat and laughed and cried and then pressed my forehead to the cool cabinet door, like I could be a person who didn't need a chair. I told Theo Daddy had sent him a college jar, a story I could live with. He nodded and asked if college had dragon classes. I said if he wanted them, they would. Here is the part I haven't told anyone except into this microphone. I looked for the other man, not to bring him into our lives, not to shift blame like furniture. I wanted to see if there was any corner of this story that made sense, any piece of it that could turn into a lesson and not just a bruise. I found his social media. He had moved to another city. He had a baby. New, pink, fathered on purpose. Photographed with a love that looked practiced and proud. In the caption of a picture of his child's hand curled around his finger, he had written, "I never thought I could be this good at something I almost missed." I closed my laptop carefully. There are some sentences that are doors you can't close once you open them. I spent the rest of the night memorizing the pattern on my ceiling. Time passed, which is not the same as healing but sometimes masquerades as it from far away. Theo turned 7 and grew 2 inches in 3 months and learned how to tie his shoes in a way that comes undone whenever he runs too fast. The downstairs neighbor moved, the violinist upstairs stayed and got better. I started therapy. I sat in a small clean room with a plant I was sure was fake and said out loud the sentence, "I let him love a lie," and the therapist asked me what I would say to myself if I were my own friend. I said I would tell her to forgive herself. Then I said I didn't know how. She said forgiveness is like a language. You start with the alphabet. You practice. You mess it up. People misunderstand you. You keep trying or you forget how to speak at all. We made a new life, in the way people do after the ship sinks and they wash up on shore. We found water. We found shade. We learned which berries wouldn't kill us. We stopped expecting to be rescued. We learned it was us all along. And then, the twist that doesn't feel like a twist when you're living it because it slides in like a note under the door. On a rainy Saturday in late spring, a package appeared on our doormat. No return address. Inside, a book, The Phantom Tollbooth, the exact edition Marcus always said he'd buy when Theo was old enough to love it the way he had loved it. Between the front pages, an envelope. My name on the outside, not his handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed like a memo from a job that has rules. It said, "For Theo to be opened when he turns 12, I couldn't be the father he deserves inside a lie, but I have never stopped loving the boy he is or rooting for the man he will become. Each year on his birthday there will be a book. Keep them for him. Tell him I am sorry for what I cannot yet learn how to carry." There was a bank statement, too, showing the fund growing with quiet regularity. There was a P.O. box. There was no request, no threat, no hope, just the shape of his careful love. I put the book on the top shelf of the closet, where I keep the winter blankets. Every time I open the door I see it. It looks like a bright blue apology that no one is obligated to accept. What do you do with that kind of love? I don't know yet. I take it down sometimes when Theo is asleep and I read a page and I think about a man sitting at a table somewhere, typing a note and folding it with the same care he used to fold his shirt before he slept. I think about the day our son will ask for the truth in full sentences I cannot dodge. I think about telling him that a father is not just a title or a name on a certificate, not just blood, not just the person who shows up for the photos, but the one who stays for the unphotographable parts. Sick nights, bad days, inconvenient questions. I think about telling him that sometimes a person loves you and cannot come close at the same time. I think about telling him his mother broke a good man's heart and lost him and deserved to. I think about telling him that he is not a consequence, he is a miracle, and even miracles can be born inside mistakes. If you need a lesson here, maybe it's this: the truth is not a kindness you deliver when it's convenient. The truth is a door you either walk through while you can still see the handle, or a wall you eventually slam into. I built a wall for 6 years and then acted surprised when my body hit it. The sound it made is still happening. It will, I think, happen for a very long time. Now for the part that leaves me silent, even telling it. A few weeks ago, on a warm evening smell sweet with cut grass, I took Theo to the park. He was on the swings pumping his skinny legs like he could kick the moon. I felt someone watching us and turned. A man stood near the fence, hands in the pockets of a jacket too warm for the weather. He had a beard he didn't used to have. We looked at each other and the whole world shrank to the size of my chest. He didn't move closer. He lifted a hand, small, not a wave really, just a gesture that meant I see him. I lifted mine back, I know. He didn't stay long. He left before Theo jumped off the swing and asked me to watch his landing. Later, on the walk home, Theo said, "Mom, sometimes I think I see Dad the way I see the moon in the daytime." I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "He's there even when he isn't shining." I almost told him everything, right then. With the grocery store on the corner and the bus sighing to a stop and a dog yanking his owner toward a smell. I didn't. Not because I wanted to keep the lie, but because the truth should be a gift I hand him carefully, with both hands, at the right table, with water poured and time set aside. The truth deserves a chair we pull out and say, "Sit. We've been expecting you, if you are listening, because you are one decision away from what I did." Go home, open your phone, and give it to the person who trusts you, and say, "I'm not okay." Cry on your couch under your cheap lamp, and tell the truth when it is still small enough to say without a hospital and a clipboard and a man who has to sit down. If you have already done what I did, don't dress it in nice words. Don't put a bow on it. Call it what it is. Then give the person you love their choices back. You cannot make the truth gentle by waiting. You can only make it heavier. I don't know how my story ends yet. I know there will be a stack of books on a top shelf that I will take down one by one on a future birthday. I know that I will answer questions I will want to run from. I know that there is a boy who will grow into his own face and that he will choose what to do with the people who loved him in the ways they knew how. I know that the man who raised him for 6 years is still raising him, in the quiet ways that count, savings he won't see yet. A story that will be told slowly, a presence like the moon in the daytime. When I tuck Theo in, he sometimes asks me to stay until he falls asleep. I sit there and listen to him breathing in and out and think about all the breaths I've taken without deserving them. I think about Marcus's hand on his back. I keep mine there, a shadow of a shadow, learning the weight of staying. This isn't a redemption arc. I don't get to stand in sunlight and declare myself new. This is a record. It's me saying, I did this, it cost this, it keeps costing. It will keep costing. And if I am lucky, The payments will one day start to look like a life I can live honestly inside. For now, this is what I have. A boy who laughs with his whole body, a blue book waiting for a 12-year-old's hands, a ledger of truths I wish I had paid earlier, and a confession that destroys more than one heart but might, someday, make one beat steadier again. If you're waiting for the twist, the one that leaves you quiet, maybe it's only this. Sometimes the worst thing you do isn't the thing that breaks you. It's the good that someone else keeps doing anyway, outside your door, year after year, without thanks, in your name. And you have to live with knowing you weren't the reason for the goodness. You were the reason it had to be done from far away.